Some people go through life feeling completely untouchable. They're convinced that money, power, and the right connections make them immune to any kind of consequence. Victor was one of those people. He owned properties, construction sites, and a small army of workers. He decided who slept where, who worked how many hours, and who got paid what. For years, nobody had dared to challenge him. Until he bought the house next to the wrong guy, next to Ethan. And what Victor didn't know, what he could never have imagined, is that Ethan had a weapon far more powerful than money. This is his story. Ethan had worked hard his entire life to build something of his own. Not a mansion, not a penthouse. Just a quiet house in a decent residential neighborhood. His house. Years of sacrifice, of giving up weekends, of long hours and silent overtime. He was a lawyer, specializing in construction law and municipal regulations. The kind of guy who reads city permit databases the way other people scroll through social media. Boring to most people, but to Ethan, it was just his world. For years, the house next to his had belonged to Margaret, a sweet, elderly woman you barely noticed but deeply appreciated. The kind of neighbor you only truly value once she's gone. When Margaret passed away, the house sat empty for a few months. Ethan didn't think much of it. The neighborhood was quiet. Life was good. Then one morning in March, a van pulled up. Then another. Then a man in a dark leather jacket stepped out. The kind of smile on his face that belongs to someone used to getting exactly what he wants. Victor had bought the house. At first, it seemed perfectly normal. New owner. Nothing unusual. Victor ran a medium-sized construction company in the region. He needed a place to house his workers, men from far away, hired with contracts that no one would voluntarily sign. 6 workers, in a house built for a family of 4. But at the end of the day, that was Victor's problem, not Ethan's. At least, that's what Ethan thought. The first weekend proved him completely wrong. Thursday night, the music started. Not the kind of background noise you barely notice through the walls. The kind of music you feel in your chest. The kind that rattles your window frames and makes it impossible to think. Ethan would wake up Friday morning with swollen eyes and a heavy head, already knowing exactly how the next few days were going to go. Because Friday the music kept going, Saturday too, and Sunday. Every single weekend, without exception, from Thursday night at 11 all the way to Monday morning at 5 a.m. That's when the workers finally left for their job sites. They weren't bad people. Ethan understood that. They were men far from home, just looking for a little relief in their time off. But human understanding has a limit, and that limit has a name. It's called a shared wall. Ethan knocked on their door the first time with a calm voice. He was almost apologetic about it. One of the workers opened the door and smiled. Sorry, we'll fix. 30 minutes later, the music was louder than before. He went back the following week. Same scene, same response. Same result. By the 3rd time, he was starting to lose his patience. By the 5th, he was furious. He called Victor directly. Victor picked up after 3 rings, with the tone of someone who has a lot to do and very little time to waste. Look, that's not my problem. The guys work all week. They relax on the weekend. We're in a residential area, not a monastery. The call lasted less than a minute. Ethan stood there holding his phone, staring at the wall he shared with that house. And for the first time, he understood that the polite road was completely closed. He called the police for the first time on a Friday night in April, around 1 in the morning. They showed up 40 minutes later. The music dropped for about 20 minutes. Then it came back up. Over the next 3 months, Ethan logged 11 calls to the police. 11 visits. 11 times the music faded just long enough for the patrol car to disappear. As a lawyer, Ethan knew exactly what his legal options were. A cease and desist letter, a piece of paper, an administrative fine, pocket change for Victor, a court injunction, months of legal back and forth for a result that would last about as long as the next game night. Ethan wasn't sleeping. He was losing focus at work. He was snapping at his wife from sheer exhaustion. Victor was winning, not because he was smarter, but because he simply didn't care. So Ethan decided to stop fighting. He decided to wait. Because anyone who understands the long game knows that the right moment always comes. It was a Saturday morning in late summer when Ethan heard the noise. Not music this time, something different, heavier, mechanical. He walked over to the garden window and saw something that stopped him cold. A small excavator was tearing down the side wall of Victor's property. Ethan put his shoes on fast and stepped outside. The old annex, a small storage structure added to the house years ago, was being demolished. The boundary wall between the two properties, which had served as a divider for decades, was already halfway down. No posted notice, no advance warning, no communication of any kind. Ethan went back inside. He opened his laptop. He navigated to the city's building permit portal, the same one he checked every week for work. He searched Victor's address. No open applications, no permit requested, no authorization in progress. Ethan slowly closed the laptop. He stood up. He made himself a cup of coffee. And he smiled for the first time in months, because in that moment he realized that Victor had just made the dumbest mistake of his life. In construction law, demolishing or building without a permit isn't a fine you pay and forget. It's an administrative violation that freezes everything: the property, future projects, the ability to sell. And when that violation is discovered while it's still actively happening, the consequences are immediate. Ethan opened his professional email account. He wrote 2 lines to the head of the city's building department, a contact he had through his work. Just a report of a potential unpermitted demolition, with a photo from his backyard attached. He hit send. Then he went and had breakfast. The response came Monday morning, less than 48 hours later. The building department had already contacted Victor about the report. The work had been suspended pending an official inspection. Victor called Ethan that same morning. The confident, dismissive tone from their first conversation was completely gone. "Hey, we need to talk. You just did something really stupid. Do you know who I am in this city?" Ethan recorded the call. Then he forwarded it to the building department as a supplementary document to the original report. The following week, city inspectors showed up at Victor's property. What they found went well beyond the unpermitted demolition of the annex. Over the years, Victor had made a series of structural modifications without ever filing for the necessary permits. Each one small, seemingly minor on its own, but added together, compiled into a single inspection report, they told a very different story. The work was officially halted. The property was placed under an administrative hold. Victor couldn't touch a single thing. No demolition, no construction, no renovation, until the entire matter was resolved. And it wasn't over, because the moment the property landed under the city's spotlight, others started asking questions. The Labor Department, the Tax Authority, Social Security. Victor had always operated in a gray area. Trimmed contracts, reduced contributions, workers underpaid. As long as nobody was looking, it worked just fine. Now someone was looking. The investigations expanded. Not just the house, all of Victor's job sites came under scrutiny. Several were flagged for documentation irregularities. One was shut down entirely. Victor had built his little empire on the assumption that no one would ever lift the lid. Ethan had lifted the lid, and what was underneath had been rotting for years. The workers living in Victor's house went strangely quiet. Ethan didn't know the details, but he had a pretty good idea. Victor, buried under legal and financial trouble, had probably found someone to blame, and they were the easiest target. The following weekend was silent. The one after that, too. Ethan slept 8 straight hours for the first time in almost a year. But the story didn't end there. Victor's property was trapped in a bureaucratic limbo of the worst kind, the kind you don't easily climb out of. He couldn't sell it. No reasonable buyer would go near a property under an administrative hold with open building violations. He couldn't renovate it. All work was suspended, and any future permit would be examined under a microscope. And he couldn't even tear down the old boundary wall, because that wall bordered Ethan's property. Any work on it required Ethan's formal written consent. Consent that Ethan had absolutely no intention of giving. Victor had turned an investment into a trap for himself. And he'd done it using the exact same words he'd thrown at Ethan months earlier. That's not my problem. Except now it was entirely his problem. The last update Ethan got came a few months later, through a colleague at City Hall. Victor was under formal investigation for labor violations and tax fraud connected to his construction business. But Victor was no longer untouchable. He never really had been. Ethan never raised his voice. He never broke anything. He never threatened anyone. He sent 2 emails, and then he let the system, that slow, heavy, unstoppable machine everyone hates until they need it, do exactly what it was designed to do. Because real revenge doesn't need emotion. It needs patience, knowledge, and the right moment. Victor didn't know how to wait. Ethan did. And this is the difference between people who win and people who lose. Not strength, not money. The ability to wait for the other person to make the first mistake. If you have made it this far, I sincerely thank you. And you? What would you have done in Ethan's place? If you like this story, leave a like and make sure to subscribe. See you next time.